Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners from coast to coast, the Gulf to the 51st state, and around the globe. Yes, I'm so sorry, Trudeau and the rest of the crew up there in Ottawa. I just couldn't resist. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all those video channels everywhere. Gab, Truth, YouTube, Brighteon, Pradion, Rumble, wherever you may be listening. Please remember to hit the subscribe button. Remember to hit the little ring-a-ding-ding bell. That'll tell you when these come out, because I don't have a set schedule, although I'm doing pretty good at getting out 2 a week now. I think this will be the second week. And if you want to throw a like at it, if you like what the Cowboy has to say, please do. First of all, I want to apologize. I am unshaven. Yep. I got my ranch clothes on. It's been, this is spring, so it's like dawn to dusk. I just came in a little bit ago, haven't even had dinner. I wanted to get this out yesterday because you will really like this show. It is like right what's happening right now. The tariffs. First of all, what is a tariff? Secondly, what is the history of tariffs? Third, how has the United States used tariffs since the very beginning, like literally a week after the Constitution was signed? I think you'll find it really interesting. And also, you'll find very interesting what Trump has been able to achieve thus far with his tariff strategy, which I don't need to really tell you is nothing at all like what the doomsday left-wing press, walking in lockstep with the communist Democrats, are trying to portray and get people all riled up and angst. My next show, which will be over the weekend, that's what, 3-4 days from now, is going to be on what they're doing, they being the other side, the lefties, to try and undermine Trump's plan. We already know what they're doing with the courts and, the judge shopping and all that kind of stuff, although we did get some really good court rulings this week, which I'm going to tell you about. But they are very much trying to sabotage this whole tariff economic plan. And shall we say they're not doing it with the the interests of you and me and America at heart. No. But I will be bringing you the real story of what they have planned and why they are doing what they're doing or not doing what they're not doing, as the case may be, actions and lack of actions, and what their real aim is. Because they do have an aim, folks. The left wing is a very long ball player. It's a long ball player. And this really started, what they are doing right now really started actually decades ago, in some cases all the way back to FDR. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight in the history of tariffs. But it accelerated with the advent of Barack Obama being elected, unfortunately, president twice, as if once wasn't bad enough. And then the third time, since he was really the president and Cadaver was his frontman. And everything that's going on right now and all the problems that Trump is facing, and the basic problem, which is $37 trillion in debt, was all on purpose. That's the next show. So on this show, I'll tell you a little bit about my week. I'd really planned to get this out yesterday or even the day before. I mean, I've had it ready to go. But this has been the week, the upside down, topsy-turvy week. Believe it or not, your cowboy had cataract surgery in his left eye Monday morning, which was a bizarre surgery. I'll tell you about it in another show, but it was bizarre because you're awake and you kind of see everything they're doing, and it's pretty weird. And the vision is back maybe 70, 75%, different colors. It's quite strange, quite strange. But it started off with that, and it went downhill from there. And everything's taking twice as long because yours truly has been ordered to not bounce around on an ATV and certainly not on a horse for, they say, 2 weeks. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'll give it to the weekend, and then I'm going to be kind of raring to go. But obviously, everything, when you have to walk to every place on the ranch, it takes a little bit longer to do things. Although my new ranch lieutenant is doing great, and he is a pleasure to have around, and he's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Because, by the way, I also can't lift anything over 15 pounds. So let's see. Can't ride an ATV, can't ride a horse, can't lift anything over 15 pounds. Oh, and did I mention I can't bend over so that my eye is lower than my heart? Now, just think about trying to get irrigation going on a ranch with all those obstacles, shall we say. Anyway, that's your rant story for today, folks. We'll let you know how it comes out here 3 or 4 days from now. And now for the founder's quote. And I thought this was particularly apropos for the stories I'm bringing you, and kind of for the story I'm going to bring you, the Democrats' real plan, their real purpose, in this next show after this one. And this is Benjamin Franklin. One of the greatest tragedies of life is the murder of a beautiful theory by a gang of brutal facts. I kind of love that quote. And the beautiful theory of the left, peace, love, dove, utopia, everybody equal, capitalism bad, socialism, communism good. That is their beautiful theory that is being torn apart by brutal facts. Okay. Let's start off with, what are tariffs? Tariffs are really tools of international, not just trade, but international diplomacy. They always have been, right? There's when you have unequal tariffs, you have a winner and a loser in this kind of tariff battle. The United States has been a loser on the tariff side since 1913, which just happened to coincide, as you'll find out with great interest, I think, the beginnings of the income tax. Oh, yes, our first progressive president, Woodrow Wilson, wasn't he a treat? So we have been kind of nailed to the wall by the rest of the planet Earth, some of it through stupidity, some of it through peace, love, dove, unrealistic thought, and some of it quite intentionally by those who have been in power who are not America's friends. Anyway, markets, as we all know, do not like uncertainty. And one of the things that Trump has been doing is keeping the entire globe uncertain. How big the tariffs are, who's going to get them, what industries will be exempted, what industries won't. And of course, you folks who may unfortunately still be in the stock market have kind of seen this firsthand, because the markets, and it doesn't matter whether it's the metals, whether it's oil, whether it's natural gas, whether it's stocks, have been crazy. And that volatility goes back to uncertainty. People don't know what to do. Well, there's a little bit more certainty as of today. Today, by the way, is Wednesday, the 9th. You will be seeing this tomorrow. Um, the U.S. economy is the largest in the world, although China is not far behind, maybe even in some cases a little ahead. And virtually every country on the planet relies on American consumers to buy that country's goods. When the U.S. imposes tariffs, which is a tax for better, or a charge on certain types of products that come from XYZ country, that increases the cost of those goods coming into this country. Now, tariffs, you may not know this, but there's really three people involved in a tariff. You have the producer, that's the guy in the foreign country. You have the importer, the guy who brings those goods into the country, and then you have the consumer. And unlike the whales of the left, while there are some things which we're going to talk about which may be affected by tariffs or now lack of tariffs as of this afternoon, who knows, uh, most will not be because the producer and the exporter generally absorb most of the costs, particularly if they think the tariff regime is going to be relatively short lived. The bottom line is consumers don't have the money to spend. They can't pay more for the goods, which means either they sell the goods at a lower price because they've absorbed some of the tariffs, or a lower profit, I should say, or they don't sell the goods at all. I mean, which would you choose? By imposing tariffs, the US or any country that has dominant economic power can pressure their trading partners into more favorable deals, and they can protect their own domestic industries from unfair competition. Uh, some of the things which may be adversely affected by tariffs, depending upon how, whether or not they come in, for how long, how big, etc., none of which we know, i.e., market uncertainty, is the automotive industry, which relies heavily on parts from Canada and Mexico. Energy prices could spike. In fact, oil's been going way down the last week or so, and today it went up for the first time. As historical background, and this is really fascinating because everybody's been laughing at Trump about how he's going to pretty much replace the income tax with tariff income, or at least a portion of the income tax. Well, guess what? I don't know why they're laughing at him because that's exactly what they've been used for over the course of history. As historical background, tariffs were a major source. In fact, in the early days of this republic, the only source of revenues for the government. That's right. In fact, between 1798 and 1913, when our progressive friend Woodrow Wilson unfortunately got voted in, they accounted for 50 to 90%. Let me repeat that, 50 to 90% of the total income to the country for the operation of the government. That's really startling. I mean, that's something I didn't know, to be honest with you. Mexico. Mexico imports a lot of food into the United States, so you may see some bumps in some of the food prices, but maybe not. And then fuel could go up maybe 50 cents a gallon. But on the other hand, America, particularly under Trump, is pretty much energy self sufficient. In fact, our energy exports are increasing literally by the month right now, which is kind of cool. And you don't export energy unless you have surplus energy, right? Just kind of common sense. Over the past 70 years, however, since our good friend Woodrow Wilson, and then following in his footsteps, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, tariffs have rarely contributed more than 2% of federal revenue. In other words, from 50 to 90% before 1913, which, by the way, was also the year that the Fed was established. This must all be coincidences. The income tax, the Fed, and the decrease in income from tariffs. Wonder what's going on here. We're going to find out. Last year, for instance, U.S. Customs and Border Protection only collected $77 billion in tariffs. Thank you, Obama third term Joe Biden. That's 1.5% of total revenues to the United States. What's really interesting is that despite all the nonsense you hear from the lefties and their captive press, is well, if there's treason trials, they ought to be up amongst the first of them. How's that? Since the 1930s, the U.S. has moved away from protectionism, in other words, protecting domestic industries and such, in favor of what's called trade liberalization. Oh, hell. And in the meantime, we lost a hell of a lot of revenue, we lost a hell of a lot of jobs, and we lost a hell of a lot of companies. And we lost virtually all of our manufacturing sector. What a great decision all this stuff was, huh? In fact, the some of the agreements which pretty much undermine tariffs and undermine the U.S. economy and U.S. manufacturing and U.S. jobs, etc., were agreements, one of which was called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which was back in the 30s, 40s. And then the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And then we added insult to injury. Not only did we shoot ourselves in the foot with the WTO, then our daunted leaders, our valued leaders, invited China into it, where they kind of finished the job of us shooting ourselves in the foot by putting a bullet through our economic head. Yeah, I mean, you can't fix stupid, folks. You can't fix stupid. These organizations have dramatically lowered a lot of global tariffs. However, not on the United States. Here's some really interesting factoids for you. Over the last 30 to 40 years, the average tariff that the United States has charged, and there are some exceptions, obviously, against a widget that's coming in from country XYZ is 2.6%. The average tariff that we have been charged, in other words, when we export manufactured goods, food goods, cattle, whatever it happens to be, has been 26%. We have been getting screwed by a minimum on the average of 24% of our imports and exports for 70 years. Now, if you want to gag, think about how much money that is. And if we had the money now, how little our debt would be. I wonder if this was a mistake or it was on purpose. We're going to talk about that in the next show. That's right. 70% of all the products that come in the United States, when I say today, as of Trump's election 5 months ago, were duty free. No tariffs at all. And we're getting slammed by tariffs by virtually every country in the world. Okay. This is what's called unfair trade practices, which is exactly what Trump and his staff has been talking about. His tariff increases, the left wing likes to jump up and down, will in fact be the largest since World War II. Good. When you learn more about what's going on, you're going to say, good, too. And Trump's approach goes back to kind of the beginnings of the country, back to the beginning, right? Back to the future. His approach marks a shift back toward tariffs as a policy tool, as a political tool, as a negotiating chip to do economic good for the country. I mean, you don't want to you want to try not to hurt other countries, but in the end, it's America first. I mean, the other countries are going to have to decide how to deal with it. So, here's some really interesting stuff for you. Let's talk about the 10 most important tariffs that the United States has used to gain economic advantage, protect domestic industries, level the playing field, bring in significant amounts of revenue to the federal government. And let's go all the way back to 1789. I mean, the ink was barely dry on the Constitution of the United States, and the Congress enacted the Tariff of 1789. It was designed specifically to fund our new government and to protect emerging American industries and to pay off the Revolutionary War debt, which was pretty humongous at the time. It did pay off the Revolutionary War debt, but it also sparked some early tensions eventually leading to the Civil War, amongst other things, between the northern colonies and the southern colonies. Because what the northern colonies were protecting with tariffs, in fact, hurt southern colonies who provided raw materials to the manufacturing base in the north. Then let's go to the Tariff of 1828, which the South really hated. I mean, this is more enmity now between North and South of the economic sort. South hated it so much they called it the Tariff Abominations. And it made foreign goods expensive, which benefited the northern manufacturers, right? Because they'd sell more stuff in the United States because other countries were selling less stuff in the United States. And it forced Southerners to pay more for imports. Obviously, they were not happy clams. And this tariff, it's really interesting. This tariff kind of highlights how tariffs, depending upon how they're formulated and what their real purpose is, not only create rifts between countries and rifts between geopolitical factions, but they can create rifts in your very own country between places with regional disparities and differing types of economic bases. All right. Then we have moral tariff, Morrill. Moral tariff was passed in 1861, right? Just as the Civil War was kind of breaking out. It was economic protection. It was named for a congressman who came up with it. His name was Justin Smith Morrill of Vermont. And that tariff, the Morrill tariff's main purpose, was to protect American manufacturers from foreign competition and to generate revenue for the federal government. Once again, revenue for the federal government, particularly to help fund what? The Union's war effort against the South. Needless to say, the South wasn't very happy about this tariff either. McKinley tariff in 1890. So this was formulated by a representative by the name of William McKinley. No relationship to the president. This tariff made imported goods more expensive, and it was specifically designed to encourage Americans, whether that the Civil War was over, north, south, east, west, didn't matter, to encourage Americans to buy American. Wow, what a novel concept. Where have we heard that before? Oh, of course. But the press and the left wing at that time, yes, there was a left wing even in 1890, they distorted what it was really costing the consumer. And that pissed people off. And think about history, folks. We got midterms coming up. It's going to tie into my next show, what the other side is really trying to do here to the great disadvantage of Americans, and to the huge disadvantage of America and America's place in the world. So they managed to buffalo the people into these tariffs were terrible and they were costing them more money and all the bad things. Pretty much exactly what you hear today. I guess somebody over on the left-hand side has looked at history. And the public not being very thrilled about what they thought were the higher prices, what the press told them was the higher prices they were paying, um, they got outraged. And that contributed hugely to a political shift in Congress. Oh, in the midterm back then. So public dissatisfaction, whipped by the left and fomented by the press at that time, resulted in a big power shift in American politics, which would later play very poorly in America's interests, as we're about to see. So this was really when the Democratic Party had been pretty much stomped into the dirt with the Civil War and slavery and the whole nine yards, because unlike what the left likes to say, you know, Democrats were the guys who had slaves. Democrats were the ones who wanted to keep slaves. It's just the way it is. It's called history. It's called fact. The Democrats came back into power after this McKinley tariff deal, and they cemented more power. The Dingley tariff, Dingley Act, 1897, which really ushered in a decade of very strong American protectionism. And if you remember, in that late 1890s period up to about 1910, 1915, that was a huge industrial revolution, right? Car, communications, all sorts of things. I mean, the list is too long to give you. It was a huge time of innovation in the United States of America and the United States industry. So that tariff kind of accomplished its purpose. But that tariff kind of melted into everybody getting upset because some of their favorite stuff, like woolens and linens and silks and china and sugar, were more expensive. So it kind of cemented the Democrats' power. That act, by the way, was the longest living tariff in American history. It lasted 12 years. Of course, what happened at the end of 12 years? Oh, that's right. The left got Woodrow Wilson elected. Oh, my, it's amazing how all this works, isn't it? Everything is interrelated. And in 1913, Woodrow Wilson, driving the bus right over the cliff, he found three things going on. Number one, the Federal Reserve was formed. Hmm, thank you, Woodrow. And we got the income tax. That's right. Government got to tax our income from then on. And do you know why? The reason that was used? Because they had to get rid of the tariffs. They were costing people so much money. And it was much better to take the tariffs down and tax citizens of the United States than to keep the tariffs up, keep this industrial revolution going, keep this like virtual no unemployment steady, and people making money hand over fist, buku buku, with a vibrant agricultural industry. It was better they convinced the folks at that time to take the tariffs down and just do this easy weensy little tax on you. Don't worry, you won't see it, you won't feel it, you won't mind it. Yeah, okay. And here we are today, folks. That's right. So the Underwood tariff, the 1913 tariff, that marked the major shift up to now in U.S. trade and economic policy. It basically changed how the government raised money, right? Relying on income taxes from its citizens rather than tariffs from foreign countries and foreign people. There you go. Rather startling revelation, isn't it? And then we have the Smoot-Hawley tariff, and I've talked about this on previous shows. Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930. And listen, the left is jumping up and down, and the press is jumping up and down, and the Smoot-Hawley tariff precipitated the Great Depression, and blah, 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 blah. Nonsense. The Great Depression was baked in the cake because the Roaring Twenties, folks, were kind of like the last 10 years here in America. Excesses, surpluses, rising prices, American, I don't want to call it protectionism, but should we say American, my poo-poo don't stink attitudes, right? Kind of a loss of touch with reality as it relates to the rest of the world. I mean, many factors contributed to the Great Depression. And Smoot-Hawley, that tariff, may have contributed a little bit, but it was not the cause of the Depression. That is bad history. It is untrue fact. So whenever you hear that, you now know, and you can push back with some real history and some real fact. Congress raised tariffs in the Smoot-Hawley tariff on over 20,000 goods that were coming into the country. And if you listen to the left wing, that means that the move backfired because all these other countries produced all these 20,000 different items. They retaliated. Global trade plummeted and the crisis, the Great Depression, worsened. Not so much, really, not so much. That is a discussion for another day. Um, then we get into, because it starts getting interesting now, right? We have the income tax. They don't need the tariff money. All the globalists of that time and up to this time, kumbaya, we can be one happy globe. And America can foot the bill because, that's what we do. We foot the bill, of course. All right, so we had the Reciprocal Tariff Act of 1934. This shifted us to trade cooperation. Okay. Um, One really interesting thing about what happened in 1934, and this is under FDR, right, who was a really big government guy. I mean, FDR was kind of like one nasty step up from Woodrow Wilson. Well, FDR loved power. And one of the things he got passed in this Reciprocal Tariff Act of 1934 was the president's unilateral power to negotiate trade agreements, bilateral trade agreements with other countries. And it allowed for mutual reductions in tariffs of 50%. So if England is charging us 10% for cotton from the South, we were charging them 10% for English tea, assuming it didn't go into Boston Harbor, of course. And this act, this Reciprocal Tariff Act of 1934, was the foundation, this is really important, was the foundation of both NAFTA, which is a horrible agreement. I mean, George Bush, wow, terrible. And the World Trade Organization, which we discussed a little bit at the beginning of the show. Another real irony in this is that this Reciprocal Tariff Act, which gave the president this power, which was greatly expanded in the next one, the Trade Act of 1974. Okay, that empowered the president basically to do anything he had to do to combat any unfair trade practices by anybody on the planet. Guess what Trump is using right now to do what he's doing? Those two acts. That's right. Pretty interesting, right? So there's a perfect example of the left thinking that, ha ha ha, we're so smart, we're going to empower ourselves. And then the next guy coming along and saying, thanks a lot. I think I'll use that to my advantage. Very, very interesting. All right. And then the last, by the way, that Trade Act of 1974, that was called Section 301.13. And it permits retaliatory actions against countries who violate any trade agreement or engage in, quote, any practices that burden U.S. commerce, unquote. So now you know why Trump declared an emergency. Now you know what he's relying on. It's really fascinating. I mean, it's really fascinating. History is a fascinating thing. And now that brings us to the latest round of tariffs, the Trump tariffs, right? 2018 through 2020, to the rigged election. And Trump implemented a series of tariffs back then. He targeted all sorts of imports, solar panels, washing machines, steel, aluminum. Probably saved the steel industry in the United States, by the way. And it was aimed to bolster domestic industries, to address trade imbalances, and they're huge. And it led to retaliatory tariffs from some key trading partners like China. Oh, well, they're not our friend anyway, so really, who cares, right? And the European Union, who's really not our friend either, and Canada. So all this has been done before, folks. This is not like brand new crapola, right? All this has happened. You're seeing a replay, but done by somebody who has a plan. As we're going to talk about, despite wails and moans and political whinings of the left, the plan seems to be working. I find this really interesting. So, besides that little factoid I gave you, we've been charging an average of 2.6. We've been paying an average of 26. So, we've been getting screwed for 70 years. Thank you, Democrats. Uh, what Trump has been able to do with these tariffs, and the really rather brilliant way he has kept everybody off balance, like who's going to get the tariffs? When are they going to get them? What's it going to be on? What's going to be exempt? How much are they going to be? How is it going to be paid? Brilliant. Okay. An unstable opponent is an opponent, should we say, much more easily vanquished. And by the way, just as an aside, you notice it's dark out, so I can't use my usual little studio area because the light's so bad. So you have my secondary backdrop here. I hope you like it. You've seen it before, those of you who've been with me for a while. Now, what do you think Trump's been able to do in this 3 weeks of craziness, right? I mean, on April 2nd, Liberation Day, he announced all these tariffs, basically global tariffs. The markets went into a meltdown. Today, he said he's going to hold off for 90 days on tariffs. Well, actually, he was going to impose just a 10% tariff across the board on everybody until things got negotiated. He's going to hold off on all these other tariffs, the 25, the 50, the 100%, all that stuff for 90 days, except for China. In China, he was going to double tariffs on. So the Chinese are proving a sticky nut crack. And by the way, though China obviously has the most leverage with the United States, there are some risks in this. For instance, pushing other countries into China's trade arms, kind of like Democrats' purpose did, pushing Russia militarily to ally with China. Yeah. Um, this whole thing is really wild because since April 2nd, remember, this is just April 9th that I'm recording this for you. In 7 days, 70 countries, 7-0, have approached Trump or actually flown to Washington or Mar-a-Lago, top folks, try and make a deal so that these tariffs that Trump is waving like an American flag don't get imposed on their country. And there are deals being made. Some deals are both countries are going to go to zero tariffs. Some countries are going to go to 10% on the American side and 10% on the XYZ country side. It's really pretty fascinating. I mean, strategy is working. It really is working. In the meantime, industries, including car manufacturers, chip manufacturers, you name it, have committed in the last 45 days. This is a huge number. 7 trillion, 7 trillion with a T, investment in new plant and equipment in the United States when they were originally going to do that in another country. Mexico's lost 3 automotive plants that are now coming to the United States. Asian countries have lost chip manufacturing plants that are now coming to the United States. I go down the list, but you get the general message. $7 trillion in investment in 45 days by all sorts of companies from all around the world in all, shall we say, walks of life, distribution channels, manufacturing channels, have committed to build in America and hire Americans. And with the deportation, which a court just approved, that was the day before yesterday, Trump seemingly won, at least at the appeals court level, the deportation battle. And with, shall we say, less people willing to work for less, Americans can expect to get paid more because this is a whole bunch of jobs that'll be coming online. Now, to some extent, they'll just replace, in some capacity, jobs that Doge is cutting out of the government. Go, Doge, go. Like, go, Elon. I love you, Elon. Go for it. So a lot of good is coming out of this. And what Trump is trying to do is recreate the old America, right? Back around the Constitution up to, of course, 1913, where 50 to 90% of our revenues came from tariffs, which ties into his plan to reduce or eliminate the IRS and to reduce income taxes. In some cases, for I think it's under 150,000, to eliminate for Americans. I mean, right? Back to the future. It's pretty fascinating. So right now, Trump is kind of having the last laugh, although you'd never know it by the wails and moans and screams and protestations from the left, because the plan is working. That's not to say it's going to work in the end. And that's not to say something can't derail it, because lots of things could. But at least somebody has a plan, and at least somebody's doing something. Because for the last 70 years, nobody's done squat. And it's been on purpose to drive America into the dirt. And that's what we're going to talk about, how and why of all of that, in the next show, 3 or 4 days from now. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Hit the like, hit the bell, hit the subscribe, blah, blah, blah. If the wind at your back, we will talk to you over the weekend. Read Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take. Bye now.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Read Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.